Hello everybody and welcome to the entertainment headquarters and welcome to another review. And once again, this review is coming courtesy of Haya, the martial arts channel. That's right, this is review 3 of my week-long review special on the channel, dedicating reviews from the Haya martial arts channel. And if you haven't got Haya, please like, share and subscribe to Haya. It's a subscription service that delivers some of the best, most recent, modern and some classics martial arts, action content, films, television shows from different corners of the globe, mostly Korea, China and Japan, but there are some hidden gems on Haya from other regions around the world. So what is the film we're here to look at today? And it is none other than this one, which is called Dongji Rescue. Now, Dongji Rescue, honestly, for me, was a real, pleasant surprise. So this film, Dongji Rescue, it's a 2025 Chinese historical war action film directed by Guan and Fei Zhenxiang and stars Zhu Yilong, Liu Wu and Nini. Based on the real-life Lisbon Maru incident during World War II, the film tells the story of Chinese fishermen who risked their lives to save over 300 British prisoners of war after a Japanese transport ship sank off the coast of Zhenxiang, East China's Zhexiang province in 1942. The film was released in China on August 8th, 2025, and it had a price tag of a budget of 80 million, and it made over 50.2 million at the box office in China alone. So this film for me was a pleasant surprise because I'm a big fan of, true life, stories like, especially based on historical events and facts and history. And of course, this is no exception because it's based on a real event that transpired called the Lisbon Maru incident, where, as said before, the ship, the film basically starts off where you see like the Japanese they're traveling across the ocean with this ship, the Lisbon Maru, and it's full of British, prisoners of war, and they're brutally treated. They're living in really horrendous, accommodations. They're basically in the hole down below, and there's leakage coming in. It's very unhygienic, and you can tell they're really seriously not being looked after, and they're basically getting treated terribly. And then all of a sudden, you've got these two fishermen who become the focal point of the story. These two fishermen, the two brothers, you have the older brother and the younger brother. The older brother, his name is called Bai, and his younger brother is called Dang. So Bai and Dang. And Bai is kind of the older brother, and he's sensible, he's realistic, he's very much somebody who's very cautious, and he doesn't like to get involved in the stories and the events around the war, keeps himself to himself. He's a very cool character. And then he has, his younger brother who was called Dang. And his younger brother is completely opposite to him. He's very spontaneous. He does things without thinking first, and he always gets himself in these very, dangerous, precarious situations. And his older brother, Bai, basically he's doing everything to protect his younger brother. He doesn't want him to get in trouble, especially with the Japanese and Chinese waters, and they live in this beautiful, picturesque island, this fishing island, and they want that to stay safe. There is a small Japanese, crew on the island that are occupying the island, who are basically overseeing and using it as a watching point during the wartime, and they're very hostile to the Chinese on the island, and obviously the older brother, or Bai, doesn't want the younger brother or Dang to cause trouble that will get them noticed and, get them in heaps of shit. During their, this day where they're basically looking out into the waters at this picturesque ocean, they see in the distance the, Lisbon Maru, and they're doing their thing. That there's these beautiful sceneries where they deep dive into the water, and they're basically scuba diving, like, going down, breathing, and they find, wrecked ships from the wartime that's been sunk during battle, and they're just exploring the waters around. When one moment they're in the water and suddenly they hear a noise, and above them is a long, stealthy British submarine, and it suddenly fires a torpedo at the Lisbon Maru and attacks it, and strikes it, and it now slowly is beginning to sink. But obviously the British submarine doesn't realize that this is a prisoner of war ship, and it's carrying British soldiers and British prisoners of war. So they've made this epic mistake without knowing that it's been a mistake made. And of course, during the chaos, there is a British soldier that is, saved from the waters by the younger brother. The older brother is very hesitant and doesn't want to save this British soldier, because he knows if he's brought to the island, it's going to bring attention upon them. And bringing attention upon them could get them deep into trouble with the Japanese. And this British soldier is called Thomas. And Thomas was played by a British actor who I do believe is starring in a new show that's debuted, which I think is called Young George Washington. I believe is the show that is debuted on one of the television or streaming channels. But this young actor, he, he's unconscious when they found him, and they basically tried to talk to him, and the younger brother's hid him behind, in this cabin. And the local school teacher, who, you get to bribe via bottles of wine to protect him and to try and understand him, because he knows a small amount of English. And so the younger brother and the school teacher, which is the one in the glasses there, he's the school teacher. He's trying to figure out what to do with this prisoner of war British soldier, while the island, of course, is being severed by the Japanese. The rest of these characters are the main cast. So you have the two main cast members, the brothers. Then you have Nini there. She is the girlfriend or the partner of the older brother. The one in the hat there, that is her father, who was like the village leader, but there's a bit of a divide between the older brother and the father, as he doesn't approve of him dating his daughter. So there are two parts of the island, the north and the south. So he occupies the north, and as long as the older brother our buy stays in the south, there'll be no problems. The one behind the father with the hat on, that's his like second in command, and he's the one who can communicate because he knows Japanese. He communicates with the Japanese soldiers once they arrive on the island. And the other two gentlemen behind them are like the other fishermen that in the end join forces to save the British prisoners of war. And the whole film is just an epic tale of action and drama throughout the course of the movie. And the prisoner of war, like I say, they try to hide him, and then the Japanese arrive on the island, knowing because of the the torpedo that hit the Lisbon Maru, and there has been a few British soldiers that's leaked out of the opening of the torpedo hit, that there could potentially be prisoners of war on the island. And then this is where things take a very dark and serious tone, because once the Japanese enter the fray and they start arriving on the island, this is when you basically, you see that the real, ugliness of war. You see the brutality of the Japanese back in the 1940s and 1942, how they treat, the people, the Japanese people. There's some real shocking, scenes of violence, especially there's an even scene where the village leader, Nini's father's trying to talk down the Japanese, and there's a couple of fishermen that get executed, and then one of the young children of one of the fishermen's literally there crying over the death of his father, and the Japanese don't hesitate but to unfortunately shoot this young child. So it doesn't hesitate to take, to shy away from the brutalness of the time period that it's set in, and the real, the angst and the sheer horrors of that time period. So I would give this film, a lot of credit that it can be an uncomfortable watch at time, but it's also gripping, because obviously I'm a big, like I said before, fan of reading about history and real events and real occurrences, even if it's terrible. We have to know about these things, because as human beings, as life moves on, as the time progresses, we learn and grow from our history of the world. And this is a film that certainly shocked me in terms of the story, the acts that were seen on screen. And, there's some marvelous, scenage in this, and it money well spent. As I said, this film cost 80 million to make, on top of the brutalness of the movie. There are some heartwarming moments in this movie with the two brothers, with the older brother and his girlfriend, with the villagers. You see them unite and come together, and the picturesqueness of the island, the tropical beauty of the island, the traditional Chinese, huts and architecture is all there for your eyes. It's such a eye-opening film in terms of beauty and architecture and colours, and it doesn't hesitate to show the beauty of China in this film, on these islands. And they spent 80 million making this movie, and it was money well spent, in my opinion. There is, you can tell, a lot of green screen, or a lot of, how they did some of the sequences. I think they did them in giant, on, stages, filling giant water tanks and having the actors in the water tanks, acting out some of the scenes for the sea sequences. But there was, two things I did discover about this particular movie that really did shock me. 80 million, they actually built a replica of the actual boat, the Lisbon Maru. They actually built a replica, a bit like what James Cameron did with the Titanic. The creators of this film built an actual life-size replica of the of the Lisbon Maru, and there's a certain scene in this where basically as the plot progresses, the two brothers, they end up on the Japanese boat, with the prisoner of war, Thomas, who they rescued. And Thomas knows basically he's done for. He's been captured. He tried to escape. The Japanese are not going to hesitate but to execute him. And this is where you see some more spontaneousness from the younger brother, who decides, I'm going to just go batshit crazy and do all I can while I'm on this boat to do what I can to rescue these people, because he says, I don't care what colour your skin is, I don't care what nation you're from, a life is a life. And that was very strong in those scenes when he's yelling at his older brother, who's still hesitant to help. But in the end, his older brother realizes what the younger brother is saying is right. And so he then puts his stubbornness to one side, and him and his brother, alongside with the villagers, decide to team up to finally go out there and try and save these prisoners of war on this slowly sinking Lisbon Maru boat. And the last half of this movie, it's like I say, the whole film's brutal. It doesn't hesitate, but the actually, 80 million was spent on rebuilding these replica of these small Japanese boats, and you literally see the Japanese going around the ocean as the British prisoners of war have been trying to escape from the sinking ship, and they basically are just going around shooting anything that they see moving in the water, and it's really intense and really brutal, and it really shows you just how during that time period how dark it must have been during the wartime, and this is why we need to never forget World War One or Two and the atrocities that took place, because we can't move on and become a better world if we don't know about the things that made this world so dark in our history. And that's exactly what this film does. It brings you a sense of gratefulness in many ways. Of we live in a time where we weren't born during this hardship, and we're very lucky to live in the world that we are in today. And I know there's tension still in the world of certain places, but we are lucky where I am and where the majority are, to not have to face these kinds of atrocities. But the money spent on this, like I say, building the replica of the Lisbon Maru, and not only building a replica of the Lisbon Maru, but actually, there's a scene very much like James Cameron out of Titanic when it starts to tilt up, and you see it snap, and when it snaps, you hear the iron and the metal turning and twisting, and it's like an animal's roar. It's very animalistic, the twisting and the motions of the metal. And you have this scene where it literally snaps and falls and begins to create a whirlpool, which then slowly starts to sucker in the British soldiers, who have now completely just boom are floating about in the waters. And this is where the fishermen join together to rescue the British prisoners of war. This film, like I say, it was a very long film, 2.5 hours. There is, times, it's like a slow build, this film, but I didn't mind the pacing of this film because I was so into the movie, because of the characters and the relationship between the two brothers. Even Tom, the British soldier, I was into, him and his growing his relationship, trying to understand this young Chinese fisherman that saved his life, and, trying to communicate with him. There were real strong stuff, and the relationship between Nini and, the older brother, and her father, the complications of that relationship was really strong, emotional, dramatic stuff on top of all of this, dark, war stuff at the same time. And like I say, 80 million spent on this movie. The sets were amazing. The locations were beautiful. The costuming was authentic. Just showing the boats and the events that transpired just suckered you in completely. But there is one element of this film that I found very far-fetched that really made me question a lot of things. Because these two brothers, they're trying to obviously show them as these fishermen and show you the life on these islands. At the same time, though, they kind of made it a bit far-fetched with them under the water. They basically became Aquaman. So the scenes here where they were jumping off boats and jumping in the water, they weren't just deep diving. They literally were heading to the bottom of the ocean with no, scuba diving tank on the back, no extra oxygen. And they were literally under the water for a good a good 20 minutes without, desperate for air, desperate for breath. And there were scenes where they were going around the wreckage and they were just slowly swimming around, and it was like, they were breathing underwater. And that was the only bit I found in the film that kind of I found unbelievable, and like it took, it was a bit far-fetched and took me away from the story slightly. But once you get past that and you get back to the island and there's this dramatic event that transpires with the Japanese and the Chinese, you're like suckered right back in. But there are those moments in the waters with the brothers that, were slightly far-fetched. But as I said, the story itself is brutal. It's true to life. Acting was outstanding. The like I say, the sceneries, the costuming, the water scenes with the boats were fantastic. The cinematography was really well done in this movie. There were some amazing one-shot angles with the boats in just following like the little Chinese sniper boats, I call them. And yes, there were some one-shot scenes with the fishing boats going around trying to rescue the prisoners of war. There was beautiful shots where the two brothers are inside the main, boat, the Lisbon Maru, and they're trying to, hide, or they're trying to avoid the Japanese, and you see camera shots of angles where they're moving around, and it was just beautifully well shot. So the director of this, I think, was money well spent. And the fact that it might have only made 50 million at the box office, but that was China alone. A lot of these films don't get big, international releases like, some other movies do. So for me personally, for the budget it had, this film did really, really well. Really, really well. And it for me, the end credit scenes as well of this movie, you've seen footage of family members of the crew and soldiers that had either survived or passed away during this event and incident. And you are listening to the stories, you are listening to the bond between the Chinese family members and the English Chinese men and how it united them and brought them together. So I found that so beautiful. And as I said before, there was that scene with the younger brother when he was arguing with the older brother, and he turned round and he said, I don't care about the skin colour, what your nationality is. A life is a life. And I thought that was a very poignant message and a very strong message that needs to be said. But yes, very good film. It's like I say, it's a strong film. You get gripped in it, but it is very emotional and it is quite brutal. But it is a war movie after all. So with that said, Dongji Rescue, I'm going to give a 9 out of 10. It's definitely a film I could go back to, but probably not for a while. I think you need, to watch something happy after watching this movie, but it's still a film worth a strong watch, and it is coming courtesy on Haya, the martial arts channel. So like I say, if you want to watch this movie, Dongji Rescue, how you can do it if you're living in the good old US of A, you can subscribe over there on Haya, and it's only $3.99. But if you're like me from the UK, get yourself a VPN, change your location to the good old USA, and then you can then yourself go onto its website, make yourself an account, pay for your $3.99 subscription, and crack on and watch some great, great content. But yes, 9 out of 10 for Dongji Rescue. And let me know in the comments below what you think of this particular movie. It'll be really interesting to see what all of you guys think. But yes, as I always say, keep on enjoying your movies, keep on enjoying all things entertainment, and catch us all at the next one. We'll be right back.